Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went to high school here in New York
Find these
City.
and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn. Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We're looking at a mixed day on Wall Street right now. Stocks getting whipsawed. Right now, the S&P is up 3. That is a gain of 0.1%. NASDAQ up 79, higher by 1%. The Dow down 118, lower by 0.5%. Stocks fluctuating as concern over the economic impact of the nation's shutdown tempers a rally in technology shares. The 10-year up 7/30 seconds, yield 0.60%. Gold down 0.2%. Crude oil also down by 0.2%. Talking about West Texas Intermediate crude. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. From New York, this is Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. The federal government has already done the unprecedented on both the monetary and the fiscal sides to shore up the American economy. But there is little question that more needs to be done. David Vitter and Barbara Boxer served together in the United States Senate for a total of 36 years. One as a conservative Republican from Louisiana, the other as a progressive Democrat from California. And despite their differences, they worked together on infrastructure as chair and ranking member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. They are now co-chairs of Mercury, the public strategy firm, and we welcome them now to Bloomberg. So, two senators at once. How lucky can a guy get? Thank you very much for both of you for being here. Give us a sense as you look at the debate that's happening even today up on Capitol Hill about how much money to spend, what to spend it on. What would you advise? Because I thought that everybody agreed on infrastructure, but they don't seem to be able to get it done. Barbara, first let's start with Senator Boxer.
Sure. Well, it's wonderful to be on with David. I think, he and I know each other for years, and you're so right. We disagreed on so many things that we were able to come together when it came to infrastructure. And there's a good reason for that, and I'm going to get to your question in a second. The reason it pulls the parties together is we know we need to get this done. I mean, for goodness sakes, 47,000 of our bridges, and this is a year-old statistic, are structurally deficient. 50% of our roads are not in good order. And that's not even to get into the fact that we still have lead in drinking water all over the country, et cetera, et cetera. So I think both parties can agree on the need. Also, the work is done through the private sector with federal dollars, and there's a certainty to it, which is so important in these uncertain times. But I think the reason why they haven't turned to infrastructure just yet, and I'd like to hear what David thinks, is there's still so much else they need to do in terms of the immediate safety net to small businesses, to workers, to hospitals, to cities and counties. And I think once that's done and that safety net is built, they're going to turn to the long-range issue of what to do about the fact that, for example, in just March, 10 million people, Americans, filed for unemployment. That's just in March.
Senator Vitter, what about it? Is it a matter of timing? Because we had another 5+ million today reported the jobless claims. Is it just a matter of timing? Because we would get some jobs out of infrastructure, right?
Absolutely, David. It's great to be with you and Barbara. I think Barbara is right. I think Congress is focused on some immediate needs in terms of small business, healthcare workers, et cetera. But we're both hopeful that after those are met, perhaps in the next one or two bills, then President Trump and Congress will turn to infrastructure. We think it's a great opportunity to help get the economy back on track. And we saw this and we worked on this together through another crisis, a smaller one, but it was certainly big for me in Louisiana, Hurricane Katrina. Barbara was terrific leading the committee through that, and I really owe her a debt of gratitude for all of her leadership in terms of help post-Katrina. And infrastructure was a key. It, number one, helped address concrete needs of recovery as well as economic recovery. We can do that again in this crisis. Number two, it brought us together. It was something we could easily agree on and work on together. That was very helpful and positive in a moment of crisis after Katrina. It could be again. But third, I would end by saying it didn't happen automatically. Barbara and I, from the very beginning, made some very specific decisions of how to work effectively together to make it happen. And I hope leaders in Congress and the Trump administration do that again to make it happen, maybe late summer, early fall.
So, Senator Boxer, this is not the first time we've talked about infrastructure in this administration. Long before the pandemic, actually, we thought there was a deal where President Trump met with congressional leadership up at the White House and said, we have a deal, we're going to do this. It foundered, I think, principally on the issue of how do we pay for it? How much of it's private, how much is public? Have we gotten past that now because the pandemic is such a crisis?
Well, I believe so. This is unprecedented. And you see the unemployment rising. That means people are not working. It means they're not paying taxes. It means that revenues are down. Businesses are so concerned. And, you know, we all know that certainty is the big issue here. That's the beauty of infrastructure, because it's not just a one-year decision. It's a kind of a 10-year, 5 to 10-year decision. But I do think, to answer your specific question, why it hasn't happened, I'll give my theory. I'm interested to hear from David on the point. But before I left 3 years ago, we did a 5-year highway bill, and it was very bipartisan. It was a rough go, but we did it. We got it done. It's a very good bill, and it's about $50 billion a year over 5 years. So I believe that Mitch McConnell, who played a big role in that, along with Harry Reid and Schumer, and so it was very, and everybody else, all the whole committee that David and I were on, we all played a big role in it. But I think Mitch felt that's good, that's infrastructure. But in light of all of this, what else can you do to put people to work on something that matters? Right now, we're helping people just get through this horrible moment of being furloughed, but they're not productive. So we need to turn to things if, in fact, we don't rebound fast. And, you know, we'll see. I mean, you look at hotspots. David has some in his state. I have some in my state. The fact of the matter is, if it's taking a while to get back, this is just a great way to put certainty into the marketplace.
And Senator Vitter, I wonder whether there can be bipartisan agreement even on the nature of the programs, because we think about infrastructure as being bridges and tunnels and highways and things, which goodness knows it is. But what about broadband, access to broadband, both rural and urban, because that's really being brought to the front right now with all the remote learning, all these kids trying to learn from home. Kids who don't have broadband are at a real disadvantage. Could that be part of infrastructure that Republicans as well as Democrats could support?
It could be, David. I think you're right. Infrastructure can be defined very broadly or very narrowly. I think any valid infrastructure, particularly that can contribute to a strong economic recovery, is worth considering. I think we need to be careful not to choose things that are politically charged or that divide people, the country, the Congress ideologically. But certainly broadband could fit into that model.
And Senator Boxer, do you think that something like broadband, universal access to broadband, could be seen as ideological?
No. I think access to information, you know, this is the greatest country in the world, and the reason is we have the strongest middle class in the world. But how do you get a middle class if we have people who can't access technology? So, no, I don't see it in that way at all. Maybe I'm missing them, but I don't see that as ideological. I also want to point out clean water, safe drinking water. These things are so important all over the country. And flood control, David referred to the way we bonded up was over getting past Katrina and rebuilding. The flood control that we need now, and all of these things that are coming at us because of climate change, and we don't have to get into why and how and what, because that does divide us. But we do see, for example, in California, these extremes of floods and then droughts and fires. There's much work to be done.
from California to Louisiana to my home city of Flint, Michigan. Clean water sounds like a good idea to me. Okay, thank you so much to former Senators Barbara Boxer of California and David Vitter of Louisiana. Great to have you on with us. That does it for Balance of Power for today. This is Bloomberg Radio, and I'm David Weston.
Have you ever thought, I wish I'd had that information?
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike. Just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. The moves may be choreographed, but the drama is real.
I dare you! I beg you to come down here right now!
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the body-slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown, check out the What's Wrong with Wrestling show. And for a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, listen to Talk is Jericho. For these and more podcasts, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is,
or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn. Want to know a great way to discover the latest and greatest sports audio on TuneIn? It's easy. Just make sure push notifications are enabled on your phone to receive recommendations of sports talk, radio, and podcasts, along with important breaking news updates.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from New York and New Jersey, streaming on YouTube. It is Thursday, April 16, 2020. Carol Master along with Jason Kelly. And Jason, an unthinkable number of people filing for unemployment benefits again. We're now up to about 22 million Americans. That's equal to about 14% of the nation's workforce have lost their jobs in the past 4 weeks.
It's a staggering figure, to say the least, Carol. Unimaginable and unthinkable, as you say, especially if we go back 6-7 weeks ago. If we thought we'd be in this position, I don't know who thought we could even potentially be in this position. But here we are. Stocks and stocks falling, treasuries climbing amid some of that news. Also, New York extending its lockdown. We're going to hear about the numbers in just a second. A lot to talk about today for sure, but that number, it really stops you in your tracks.
We knew it would be bad, but nonetheless, when you see the actual numbers, it certainly is disturbing. All right, lots to cover over the next few hours. Let's get a check on the trading day. Here is Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. Happy Thursday to you both. I want to begin with a headline out of France. Number of virus cases there climbing by 17,164 to more than 165,000. Stocks in the U.S., they're getting whipsawed today. Stocks fluctuating as concern over the economic impact of the nation's shutdown tempered a rally in technology shares. Let's begin with NASDAQ, up 38. That is a gain of 0.5%. Last update, I told you the S&P was higher barely. Right now, it is down 6 points. A little change, lower by 0.2%. The Dow is down 188 points, lower by 0.8%. 10-year yield 0.59%, up 10-30 seconds. Gold, talking about spot gold, down 0.2%, $17.12 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude, little change today, below $20 a barrel, $19.82 on WTI. It is down now by 0.3%. After earnings, Morgan Stanley now down by 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Carol Massar, and you just heard Charlie mention Morgan Stanley. We're going to hear a little bit later some analysis of that throughout the show. Morgan Stanley CEO James Gorman, he had some things to say, Carol, about life after the virus. We're starting to hear some of the big names come out and start to imagine, if we can, what this is going to look like. So that's your looking ahead. Looking back a little bit, the Business Week cover story.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about Carnival. I mean, this is an unbelievable story, and it really gets into what they knew, when they knew it, and what they did about the virus. As you said, it's the cover story. And Austin Carr and his team, they talked to the CEO. They really talked to a lot of individuals to get an idea of what it was like on those ships. But again, you know, I feel like one of the big themes of this virus story is the timeline of when people knew information, who did what, because that really determined the outcome of a particular, you know, for a particular company, for a particular state, for a particular city.
Well, and it does feel like, and I think this story captures it, and we'll talk about it with Austin Carr and Joel Weber a bit later on. But you and I both read this story this morning, and I think our jaws dropped across state lines.
I've done a fair amount of work with them and understand and have been actually on a ship to get a feel of it. And there are precautions taken because things can go through a ship so quickly. But again, some great reporting, and we'll talk about it with Austin and Joel a little bit later on. Also, the founder of Tom's.
More hopeful.
Yeah, the founder of Tom's. This whole idea of, you know, buy one, give one. They really created the model. He's got a new mission, and it's all about helping people help themselves. And I feel like it's so timely, Jason, kind of exactly what we need at this moment.
Absolutely. So
that's being in the moment, right? Looking back, looking forward, and being in the moment.
And being in the moment. We're going to get to Blake Mykoski later on in the show, round out the show with him. In the meantime, let's set the Business Week agenda. It's all about jobs and the market's reaction, the economic reaction. To break it down for us, we have Mike McKee, international economics and policy correspondent for Bloomberg, joining us, as well as Dave Wilson, stocks editor for Bloomberg. Mike, I want to start with you. As Carol said, we knew the numbers were going to be bad. We knew the estimates. I feel like we're having this conversation every week, but the fact that we're having this conversation every week sort of says something, doesn't it?
It tells you things are really, really bad. I mean, we hit the wall so fast in this recession. It's not taking months. It took 1 month to wipe out all of the job gains of the last 10 years since the great financial crisis. So that gives you a measure of where we are. Another 5,245,000 jobless claims this week. We'll probably see something similar for another week or two as these people are all absorbed into the system. You're probably looking at 16 to 20% unemployment for the April jobs report. So things are pretty bad.
Things are pretty bad, no doubt about it. And yet, Dave Wilson, as you rightly point out, in terms of market swings today, not a ton of volatility.
Absolutely not. You know, what's interesting is that the S&P 500 has managed to stay within 1% of yesterday's close. And if that persists through 4 o'clock Wall Street time, it'll be the first time it's happened since February 19th, which was the day when the S&P 500 peaked, when that almost 11-year bull market hit its apex. And it's been coming down ever since, and we've had swings, and now you're getting just a little bit of stability. So, the economic numbers weren't enough to really shake people up, and earnings on balance weren't either, although you can certainly find some examples where things moved around. Take a company like Abbott Labs, which is up almost 6% in response to their results, which were better than analysts were looking for. They withdrew annual forecasts like a whole lot of other companies have because of the coronavirus, but at least the first quarter numbers, they benefited from sales of drugs and infant formula. That's the sort of thing people were going for as they were stocking up in anticipation that they'd be staying at home for a while.
So, Mike, come on back in here. This notion of what we saw today, the data that we saw today, we saw the beige book yesterday. You're talking to Fed officials all the time. You're talking to economists as they are synthesizing all of this. What are they thinking when it comes to the next steps, either on the monetary side, the fiscal side, or just broadly what it says about the economy?
Well, I think the general agreement is it has to be on the fiscal side now. The Fed has done just about all it can do for the time being. They can add more guaranteed loan money because they didn't use up all what Treasury got in the stimulus bill for them. But those are loans. That's not direct stimulus. They've cut rates to zero. They're doing unlimited QE at this point. We're at a maintenance, put a floor under it time period right now, not really stimulating the economy. So what everybody says is that Congress has to come back and do more. They got to help states and cities. They got to help hospitals, and they got to send you more money. Maybe not Jason, but send Carol. They'll send Carol some money.
I'll take it. Hey, the thing is, Mike, though, is there some point, I understand we need this assistance, no doubt about it, especially for those who are less fortunate and some of the more vulnerable populations. But I do wonder about, is there a point where we as a country and a government get ourselves into financial problems?
That's going to be an outstanding question. We had a sort of theoretical debate about this whole idea of modern monetary theory. And it's not that the Fed adopted it, but they're going to be testing some of the principles of it. The idea that you won't have a financial crisis from a very, very large deficit. We'll see. Japan has managed to do it for years. Can the U.S. do it? And what kind of pressure will there be to bring down that debt over time? The Fed can maintain its large balance sheet as long as it wants, but for the country, it's going to be an interesting question of whether we see any crowding out or not.
Final thought to you, Dave Wilson. What are you looking at for the rest of the trade?
Well, it really is a matter of whether things kind of hold on in terms of stability. And where do we go from here? There is some focus on 2,800 as a number of interest for the S&P 500 given past performance. So we'll see. Now that we're there, is it going to be a case where the market finally stabilizes, or do we have more volatility in store?
Especially when you've got economic reports like the ones we got today that continue to come out, right?
And more earnings. Lots more earnings to come, that's for sure. All right, Dave Wilson, thank you so much. You'll be back in a bit with your chart and stock of the day. And our thanks, as always, to Michael McKee, International Economics and Policy Correspondent, breaking it down for us in the world of economics. Let's get over to Bob Moon now. He's got world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, thank you very much. With the key coronavirus rescue fund exhausted, lawmakers are facing new pressure to break a stalemate over President Trump's $250 billion emergency request to replenish the program that helps small businesses keep workers on their payroll. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy says the Trump administration saw this coming and wanted to add more to the fund last week.
We have now taken all the money, $350 billion. Secretary Mnuchin asked as an administration last week if we could increase that by another $251 billion.
Democrats argue that's not even close to enough. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi also isn't convinced the money is going where it needs to go.
Well, we think they all need the resources. If it isn't self-evident that hospitals need the resources, if it isn't self-evident that state and local government need they're in the hole.
President Trump is preparing to unveil national guidelines on when and how the country starts to recover from the sharp economic pain of the coronavirus pandemic. As he does so, a panel of lawmakers is urging him to heed the advice of public health experts. The new guidelines are aimed at clearing the way for an easing of restrictions in areas with low transmission of the coronavirus, while keeping them in place in harder hit places. Ultimately, decisions on when to ease up will rest with the governors. Word this afternoon that Brian Dennehy, two-time Tony winner at First Blood and Silverado star, has died of natural causes at the age of 81. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
There are times when you have to go it alone, but these should not be those times.
With a medical crisis, can any other central bank execute?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Ferro.
Walk me through the dynamics that are going to shape the euro in the coming months.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
Do we have the ability to coordinate with this virus?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
When things move this quick, do things break?
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative. And that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance?
Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Are you interested?
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency. Life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, you must stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work. But only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Stay home to help protect the NHS and frontline staff working to save lives. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Wi-Fi connection spotty? Make sure you're never without something to listen to by offlining your podcasts on TuneIn. Just find your favorite podcast and tap the 3 dots to download the episodes you want to hear. When you're off the grid, you'll find all your offline audio under your favorites.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 4, relax. Don't feel like you have to be productive during these stressful days? This is the perfect time to focus on yourself. Whether that means meditating, taking a bath, sleeping in, or doing nothing at all, take a deep breath and treat yourself. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
The moves may be choreographed, but the drama is real.
I dare you! I beg you to come down here right now!
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown, check out the What's Wrong with Wrestling show. And for a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, listen to Talk is Jericho. For these and more podcasts, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll look at race, politics, and the pandemic.
Social distancing is critical, but you have to have a certain class position, really, to be able to fully engage that practice.
I'll talk with Kianga Yamada-Taylor. Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. It has been a volatile Thursday. The Dow lower now by 69 points. S&P, NASDAQ, both on the plus side. Stocks fluctuating as concern over the economic impact of the nation's shutdown tempers a rally in technology shares. NASDAQ up now by 80 points, higher by 1%. S&P is up by 6. That is a reversal from our last update, up now by 0.2%. The Dow is down 66. That is a drop of just about 0.3%. After earnings, Morgan Stanley down 0.1%. We've got gold, little change, down less than 0.1%, down by about $1 the ounce at $17.16. 10-year, the yield there 0.60%. Crude oil now up by 0.8%, back above $20 a barrel on West Texas Intermediate crude. 20.05 right now, up by 18 cents. So again, recapping here, mixed day on Wall Street, with the S&P up by 5, a gain of 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Got it, Charlie. Thanks so much for the update. Well, it's been a busy day, another busy day, and we continue to hear from the big banks. Morgan Stanley reporting their results today. Morgan Stanley CEO James Gorman, he caught up earlier with our Bloomberg News editor-at-large Eric Schatzker, and they talked about many things, of course, the quarter and, of course, the impact of the virus, but they also talked about the future of finance and how the character of the industry will change after the pandemic.
I think, yes, we will have less footprint. I think that's highly likely. We've proven we can operate with effectively no footprint. So now, on the other hand, as I said, I want most people in the office most of the time. So no, I don't think the character of the industry will change as a result of that. I think what has been informally done with the number of employees in the last few years migrating to a day at home will become, over time, much more of a formal structure that we probably evolve to.
All right, of course, that was the CEO of Morgan Stanley, James Gorman, catching up earlier with our Eric Schatzker. Shares of Morgan Stanley, by the way, just down about 0.2%. Let's talk about the quarter, though, with Allison Williams, Senior Analyst, Global Investment Banks and Asset Management, here with our Bloomberg Intelligence team. She's on the phone from New Jersey. Allison, nice to have you here. Hope you are doing well. Your family's doing well. Talk to us about Morgan Stanley. What was important for you on this call?
So I think, Morgan Stanley sort of capped off the trends that we saw across the banks, and I would say three key things. One is just the fact that we don't know on loan loss provisions. We saw a huge increased provisions at all of the lenders. We saw sort of the least at Morgan Stanley, and that really is focusing the risk on sort of the length of the recession and the fact that we might have more provisions to come for those banks. And I think that's really the central risk going forward. The second thing, of course, was a huge jump in trading. Obviously, there's questions around that being sustainable. It's the best quarter when we looked since 1Q12 with strength across FICC and equities for a variety of reasons, a strong start, but then a huge jump in March. So we expect that probably that huge quarter is not sustainable, but we do see opportunities for some things like derivatives. And then the third takeaway is really just the fact that this is a very different recession. And so with Morgan Stanley today and all the banks, as I said, we saw strong trading. We did not see the marks that we did in the last recession. And by marks, I mean things on the balance sheet that you have to mark to market due to valuation. So we did see some hits. We saw some manageable things there at Morgan Stanley in particular today. But the fact is that these banks have much stronger balance sheets, and companies like Morgan Stanley and Goldman really sort of differentiating themselves versus last time where it was sort of apparent that even the brokers had become sort of big lenders.
Alison, I'm so interested. Yeah, I'm so interested in that particular point about where we are with these banks now versus the financial crisis. And I know that people are loath to give credit to anyone anywhere in America, generally in the world in 2020. And yet it feels like a lot of the things that were done to ensure that a lot of the things that happened in 2008 didn't happen again kind of worked. Is that your sense?
Well, it is definitely true that, the system sought to make the banks safer and better capitalized, and that is for sure what we're seeing. The banks are part of the solution, this crisis that we've been saying, and I think most people agree, versus being the problem in the prior crisis. Yeah. They really drove the last downturn, and this time they're really being looked to as a support. The one pivotal question that remains for banks really relates to their dividends. And in the last crisis, it was really a matter of weak balance sheets, and sort of they didn't have the ability to earn the money, and it was sort of a little bit more called for due to the fact that they didn't have the capital. This time around, the banks are in good shape. They've raised their dividends modestly, but they've really been returning capital through buybacks. Bank of America is a great example. They said that they purposely kept their dividend at a level where they wouldn't have to cancel it or suspend it. But we are getting more and more calls, and you might see this sort of continue to bubble up if the recession extends. But it's not due to ability, it's more due to sort of a call to support the economy.
What's also interesting, and let's not forget, man, because so much has happened since February when they announced plans to buy E-Trade Financial. I remember when the headline came across and we're like, whoa. So, I mean, unfortunately, it was kind of at the top of the market there. What are your thoughts on that?
So it was, it's stock deals sort of moved down with the market, so it's a little bit different than having to have promised cash at the top of the market.
Yeah.
So both evaluations are falling. Now, if we think about E-Trade and think about the reasoning behind it, really was sort of more of a long-term deal for Morgan Stanley. It's set to close in the fourth quarter. What's most interesting to us around that deal is Morgan Stanley's promise to not cut any staffing this year. They did do some pretty steep staff cuts at the end of the fourth quarter. But, due to the timing of the deal, what does that mean for any sort of different job changes that might take place? The other thing that I would say is just the fact that Morgan Stanley is the equities leader. Their trading actually did not go up as much as some of the others. So I think, there was some sort of questions around that. A lot of that has to do with mix. They are still the leader in that business.
All right. I think we're going to leave it there. Alison Williams, thank you so much for breaking down Morgan Stanley for us. I want to bring you one headline. The president saying he will give economic reopening guidelines in a press conference at 6 p.m. We are told he is speaking with the governors this afternoon. So we may, just knowing how the world works, may get a little bit of a preview of this before 6 p.m. But stay tuned. We'll bring you that all as it happens. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly, Carol Masser here on Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. It's been a bumpy ride for stocks, with gains in technology overshadowed by renewed economic fears. The government says 5.2 million Americans joined the unemployment rolls last week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 101, the S&P 500 up 2 points, the Nasdaq Composite up 69. Airline stocks are getting crushed after United said travel demand is essentially zero. It expects to fly fewer people in all of May than it did in any single day during May of last year. Starbucks plans to gradually expand operations at some U.S. stores, citing progress in the fight against the coronavirus. It set no specific target dates. Retirement savers mostly stayed the course amid the coronavirus market rout. Morningstar says less than 6% of 401k participants changed their allocations in the first quarter, while the median 401k lost 11%. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
The market's in focus every business day. The P&L Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
What's behind this engine of gains?
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
The U.S. market looks relatively safe.
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
Ward McCarthy joins us right now.
P&L with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Are you interested?
Get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft with TuneIn.
Do your homework on this year's top prospects, rising stars, and late-round sleepers with football podcasts like Move the Sticks.
Is my pick because I know he is an athletic freak, a guy that is capable of doing it all. He can blitz, he can run, he can cover.
And when the draft gets underway on April 23rd, follow every round and every pick for free.
In the 2018 NFL. It's always football season on TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
For weeks, we've heard about panicked shoppers causing a run on toilet paper by irrationally hoarding it. But that ignores one key factor.
That the toilet paper you use when you leave the home is not the same toilet paper you use at home.
How incomplete information, whether about supply chains or infection rates, leads to incomplete narratives. Don't miss this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your area.
The game will be 185 to 183 and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got it's thud. I can practice what they call
Follow
thud.
national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me, Max. You can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know.
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm out sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe, keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Whenever you're unsure of what to play next, head to the homepage and discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Well, coming up, we are going to get an update on the medical side of the virus. We'd like to do this with our friends down at Johns Hopkins, and there are public health concerns, there are mental health concerns that are really, really important to remember amid all of this. A lot of anxiety out there right now, Carol.
Yeah, and I'm glad more and more people are talking about it and addressing it. All right, more of that to come in just a moment. Let's get back to your top business stories with Charlie Bell.
All right, thank you very much. And here's what's going on. I want to begin with a headline on the Bloomberg out of New Jersey, where Governor Phil Murphy says he wants to tap up to $9 billion in borrowing, says he'll take advantage of a Federal Reserve program, says the Fed would buy up to $500 billion in muni bonds. Murphy's saying that without the borrowing, major budget cuts will happen. Right now, we've got the U.S. equity market trading mixed and little changed, at least on the S&P, holding on to a 6-point gain right now, up by 0.2%. NASDAQ advancing by 1%, been higher all day long, up now by 85 points. The Dow lower now by 74 for the Dow Jones Industrial Average. That is a drop right now of just about 0.3%. Stocks getting whipsawed today as concern over the economic impact of the nation's shutdown tempers a rally in technology shares. Has been a volatile day on Wall Street. Well, one of the big questions surrounding COVID-19 is who becomes critically ill and who doesn't. Dr. Jason Farley is a professor of nursing at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
When we're looking at how many people become critically ill, we're still looking at approximately 20% of people hospitalized, needing some form of acute care. And of that group, approximately half will need some form of mechanical ventilation. Now, those needing mechanical ventilation tend to skew toward our older population, and we're still seeing that data in the United States consistent with what we've seen around the world.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Morgan Stanley shares lower after the bank reported wealth management and net revenue of just about $4 billion, missing analyst estimates of $4.31 billion. Morgan Stanley shares actually just turning around. They're up now by 8 cents, little changed. Morgan Stanley 38.48. Hilton Worldwide Holdings raising cash by selling loyalty points and offering bonds as the company rides out the coronavirus crisis. We've got Hilton Worldwide shares down, little change, down by 3 cents right now, down less than 0.1%. American Express, which is providing the points, down by 2.5%. Recapping, S&P up 4, a gain of 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. And you heard Charlie mention some comments we had earlier from the Bloomberg School of Public Health down at Johns Hopkins, of course, supported by Mike Bloomberg. We are delighted to have our own Johns Hopkins expert with us, Dr. Laura Murray, senior scientist and clinical psychologist for the Bloomberg School of Public Health, joining us on the phone from Houston. Dr. Murray, thank you so much for joining us. We have spent a lot of time talking about antibodies and testing and all sorts of things related to the medical side of this crisis on the one hand. The other thing we haven't talked maybe as much as we should is about the mental health side of this. I know we're experiencing it here in the tri-state area big time, especially in lockdown, and anybody who's got kids and jobs and trying to balance all that certainly is experiencing it. What are we learning so far? What are you seeing in your practice?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. We are definitely seeing across the globe an increase in the normal aspect of sort of worries and fears and anxieties around what's happening with coronavirus. And Certainly those tend to spike a little bit more as certain states are going through spikes in the curve and others are sort of waiting. So we're definitely seeing more attention to it, though, also in the media, which is great.
Well, and what's your advice to individuals who are at home? I have talked with colleagues, especially individuals who maybe aren't married or have a partner or have family at home. Those of us who are with our families, there's interaction with others. There are other people, though, that feel incredibly cut off. What's your advice to people to recognize that maybe something's not quite right and that they need some help?
Yeah. Boy, that's so important. I think that there's good movement around trying to reframe the idea from social distancing to really physical distancing, but keeping in touch socially. And for each individual, that looks really different. Some people really need more of a visual, while others are fine on the phone. Some people just really need that. Some of our younger generations are really okay as long as they have access to some of that social media. So it's really finding what you need. One of the concrete suggestions we talk about a lot is if you start feeling down, you really want to reach out to those around you and schedule calls. So you should be scheduling calls, but you should also ask other people to schedule calls to call you. Because sometimes when we start feeling low, as you guys probably have felt at some point in your life, you just don't have the energy to call that person or to reach out to them. And so that's really important. Just another quick point. I cannot stress enough how important schedules are. And what's interesting is that it sounds so simple and so sort of silly in a time like this, but it actually regulates our brain chemistry, everything. And so really trying to go to bed and wake up at the same time and have specific goals during the day really can also help you from starting to get into that hole.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that, and I know that we've been trying to practice that in our own house, even if it's like a morning walk with my daughter or something like that, which Carol and my team have to put up with, like the wind blowing as I'm like walking down to the lighthouse.
We love hearing Alice in the background
every morning. I do wonder, Dr. Murray, about what companies can do. We're a business network. We've got a lot of people who are trying to work for a living, trying to balance everything, trying to lead teams. And, I know that it is easy to sort of get caught up in the day-to-day and sort of getting work done and, trying to jam everything in. What can leaders do? What can business leaders do for their folks to make it a little bit easier?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that one of the first things that we always talk to leaders about is really taking care of yourself. So understanding what is a leader's fuel, what motivates them and refills their tank. Because as a leader, you're really driving the optimism, the camaraderie, the sort of vision and the ongoing movement of your company and your team. And so I know that sounds backtracking a little bit, but what we're seeing is leaders who aren't taking care of themselves, now their teams are falling apart more than ever. So I think that's really important. The second thing is really tune into what your teams are needing. So, for example, there's leaders that are running organizations that have literally had to be shut down. But then there's also, for example, leaders of hospitals where their people are busier than ever and being called to do things that are really scary. So it's really important as a leader to tune into and understand the needs of your team.
Yeah, you got to be. There's a certain amount of sensitivity, and sometimes you got to do a little bit of probing to kind of feel people out. I've certainly felt that with some of my extended family and stuff, just checking on people and making sure everybody's doing okay.
But that self-care piece is too, because you can't really be good for other people, and you can't really care about them unless you're, caring about yourself. It's not selfish; it's actually selfless in a lot of ways. Dr. Laura Murray, thank you so much joining us from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Let's get to Bob Moon now for world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, President Trump ruined the economy. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi staked out that position today during her weekly teleconference with reporters. More than 5 million more people have filed to receive unemployment assistance this week, more than 22 million since businesses were shuttered by the COVID-19 pandemic. Pelosi says the administration's weak moves to contain the virus were too little, too late.
Because of an incompetent reaction to this health crisis, the strong economy handed to Donald Trump is now a disaster, causing the suffering of countless Americans and endangering lives.
The emergency spigot for small businesses has run dry, and lawmakers are still bickering over how much more should be authorized and where it should go. The program gives grants to small businesses so they can maintain payroll and pay rent during the virus outbreak. Bus drivers are frequent victims of coronavirus. The situation has gotten so dire that the nation's largest transit workers union is warning its safety demands must be satisfied or drivers will stop reporting to work. Bloomberg's Martin DeCaro has that story.
If bus and train operators are expected to move essential workers to grocery stores or hospitals, they have to be given priority for protective equipment and on-site rapid testing. That's the gist of what Amalgamated Transit Union President John Costa is telling America's public transportation agencies.
We're the biggest casualties right now in this pandemic.
At least 50 transit workers have died in New York City alone.
At first, we were told you didn't need masks and just wash your hands.
In Toronto, bus drivers, in what may be the first of many such actions, refuse to work without face masks. Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
In-depth analysis.
When we're stuck indoors all day, we might find our energy bills creeping up uninvited. The cheeky rascals. And none of us need that right now. But by simply switching your energy with Money Supermarket, you could save £280 on your bills. It's just one small step towards money calm. Money Supermarket.
The NFL Draft is on TuneIn.
Starting Thursday, April 23rd, ESPN Radio has you covered with live coverage, discussions, and analysis of every round.
Be there when the future stars of the NFL find their home.
And your team selects the players that will shape their future for seasons to come.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 4, relax. Don't feel like you have to be productive during these stressful days? This is the perfect time to focus on yourself. Whether that means meditating, taking a bath, sleeping in, or doing nothing at all, take a deep breath and treat yourself. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your area.
The game will be 185 to 183, and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got it's thud. I can practice what they call.
Follow national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me, Max. You can can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know.
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as though I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe, keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn. Not all heroes wear capes, but most wear tights. Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a podcast on TuneIn. For expert analysis of the latest wrestling storylines, turn on the WWE podcast.
Big Steve edition.
Or listen to the Steve Austin Show for no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities.
Because now on the show, everybody's kind of the same size, but as soon as I saw you, it's been...
For these and more, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Mixed Thursday, volatile session. S&P holding on to gains of 6 points now, up by 0.2%. The Dow is down 70. That is a drop of 0.3%, while NASDAQ up 90 points right now, higher by just about 1.1%. Traders are assessing a fresh batch of corporate earnings. Morgan Stanley posting a 24% jump in trading revenue. Morgan Stanley shares little changed, higher now by less than 0.1%. The 10-year up 8/32, 0.60%. Gold is down 0.1%, $17.14 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.8%, $19.71 a barrel. Recapping, equities mixed with the S&P up 4, up 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. It is Thursday. Checking out the cover story of the magazine this week. It is about Carnival Corporation, what it knew, when it knew it, what it did or didn't do when it came to the virus. Let's get into this story. Bloomberg Business Week editor Joel Weber is with us on the phone from Brooklyn, along with Bloomberg News tech reporter Austin Carr here with us. He is on the phone from New York. Joel, this is like a classic Business Week story.
Yeah, so it was one that, look, there's been so much that's happened over the last few months, but, one of the things that I think has stuck with everyone has been this line of reporting just around the cruise ships, which obviously, of all the places that you probably don't want to be during a pandemic, a cruise ship might be pretty high on that list. And it turns out, lo and behold, that is definitely true. And Carnival, which is basically, the biggest name in cruises and, all kinds of subsidiaries that you maybe think of as, their own private lines, actually are Carnival lines. And what Austin's reporting, and this was a big team effort beyond just him, but what this really shows is a company that was slow to react, even though they had early indications how bad things could get. And, I'll leave it to Austin a little bit here, but it really does speak to an industry that is in a really perilous moment here.
Come on in, Carr.
Hey guys, it's good to hear your voices.
Same.
Yeah, we spent a lot of this time sort of talking not just to passengers on these affected ships, but also government health officials, as well as Carnival executives, really trying to understand what exactly was the timeline for all this went down. And we rewind the clock all the way back to the very first alert that they got, which was at 11:12 p.m. on February 1st, and just the delays and constant mistakes that were made along the way before they informed passengers of these coronavirus or potential coronavirus infections aboard their ships. And so this really the story is really just, in a lot of ways, a reflection of how so many of us took so long to come to grips with this crisis and sort of respond to it appropriately.
I'm curious too, having spent some time with Carnival and been on a ship, they're very careful about kind of guarding who you talk to in terms of employees. And I'm curious about, I know you talked to a bunch of passengers. It's really cool, the story online, but how easily people were willing to, especially employees, talk about what the conditions were.
We've actually found the passengers were in many ways, and this is the most respectful way I can put this, they were more aware of the timeline and how this all went down than often Carnival was. When we were trying to get exact answers on what happened when, who knew what when, many times Carnival would give us one answer, we'd go back to these passengers and they would say, no, that's not how it went down. Carnival is not accurate in their timeline. But yeah, no, some of the most colorful parts of the stories are just the announcements. I mean, picture yourself on this ship, you're cruising around the ocean, you're having a grand time, you're going to ukulele concerts, you're going to hula lessons, you're playing bridge, you're having daiquiris, and suddenly this announcement comes overhead saying there might be an infection aboard the ship because an ex-passenger, someone who disembarked, had tested positive when they got off the ship. And so the big question for all those passengers is, oh my God, am I going to be infected too?
Yeah, and Joel, there's some cinematic aspects to this story. You really could, we joke about this sometimes, but there's a Netflix movie in here somewhere of, what it was like there on those ships. And the other thing that becomes clear, and you alluded to this earlier, was this idea that this was so central to the global outbreak of this, whether it was here in the United States or in Asia. What jumped out at you specifically in terms of telling the broader story here, Joel?
Well, I think there's this is a huge part of the story, Austin's story, is this risk assessment that I think Carnival was clearly doing, but I think business leaders everywhere were attempting to figure out how do you assess this risk and what do we do about it. And I think the unfortunate part for Carnival was that once there is sort of an outbreak on a ship like this, and for a moment back when the pandemic was still an epidemic and contained to China, there was actually more cases on a Carnival ship than anywhere else in the world, right? So that just gives you a sense of what they were dealing with early on. But that risk assessment is like, how quickly can you pivot and, go into a conservative mode? And it does not look like Carnival was able to do that in a meaningful way. And to be clear, there are still two boats on the ocean right now that are Carnival boats. And, it just gives you a sense of how challenging that business model is. But also, they may not have acted as quickly as they probably would have liked.
And those are boats with thousands of people. Austin, you talked with Arnold Donald, the CEO, who in many ways was brought on to help right the ship, pun intended, after a series of mishaps under their predecessors. And everybody kind of remembers all of the various, problems that they had, people getting sick, people stuck on the trip, ships
the poop
crashing,
ship.
the
Let's
Italian ship,
the poop ship.
Yeah, exactly. So what did he have to say about all of this?
Yeah, so Arnold Donald, the CEO, he'd come in about 5 or 6 years ago to, as you mentioned, turn the boat around, and in many ways he did in those first couple of years. He definitely righted the stock price. They doubled in market value, but there was definitely some parts of the culture that were not addressed. They still had issues, including a Department of Justice fine of $40 million for dumping, waste and oil contaminated waste into the ocean, and they violated that probation again as recently as 2019. So going into 2020, he was really talking about customer safety and sort of improving protocols. But then suddenly by February, they have this first outbreak aboard the ship, and then another one, and then another, and now we're up to about 9 ships in total. So when I talked to him in early April, what he kept saying to me repeatedly is, look, please, you just got to understand the position we're in. We were realizing this as the rest of the world was realizing this. Please don't Monday morning quarterback. We were doing the best we can. And the thing about it is we also talked to the CDC, and they were very emphatic in saying, look, we'd really understand that if it was just one ship or only the first 2 ships, but now we're at 9 ships. How the CDC official, Dr. Sidney Freeman, who leads the cruise ship task force, she said, quote, that excuse doesn't fly.
Wow. Well, I have to say, Carol and I both read it this morning, and we're texting almost immediately. It is an unbelievably powerful piece of reporting, as Carol said at the top. It's classic Bloomberg Business Week in many ways, just a deep dive into an issue at the fore, and a company story, a strategy story, a story that will be studied, a case study that will be studied, I think, in terms of pandemic response and customer safety and stakeholders. Well, and you do wonder how much they come back, right? We're just talking about restaurants, how tough it's going to be for them with social distancing, and you do wonder with cruise ships. I mean, it's hard to do any kind of social distancing. Jill Weber, thank you so much, editor of Bloomberg Business Week, on the phone from Brooklyn, and on the phone in New York, Austin Carr, technology reporter at Bloomberg News. It is the cover story, so do check it out. That magazine on newsstands. Also, check it out at Bloomberg.com. Yes, Jason Kelly? I'm just going to say, for those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week continues right here. Much more to come. We're going to talk eco. We're going to talk to the founder of Tom's, and much more. If you're listening on 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business, it's next.
Have you ever thought...
Because you can't watch Trolls World Tour at the cinema, Sky Store is bringing the cinema home to you with Sky Store Premiere.
I'm going to destroy all music, except for rock!
We need to unite the trolls to save all music.
Our brand new service that lets you watch movies at home that would normally be in the cinema.
Rock and roll!
Let's go save the world! Yeah!
Prepare for battle. This ought to be good. Enjoy Trolls World Tour now on Sky Store Premiere, bringing the cinema to you.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 4, relax. Don't feel like you have to be productive during these stressful days? This is the perfect time to focus on yourself. Whether that means meditating, taking a bath, sleeping in, or doing nothing at all, take a deep breath and treat yourself. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your 7th inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting 9 podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of active
Round the Bases with the StatCast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number 1. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
The NFL Draft is on TuneIn.
Starting Thursday, April 23rd, ESPN Radio has you covered with live coverage, discussions, and analysis of every round.
Be there when the future stars of the NFL find their home.
And your team selects the players that will shape their future for seasons to come.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The Woj Pod with Adrian Wojnarowski.
Doris, you had reason to believe that you needed to get a test for the coronavirus.
Right. Well, let's just start with the headline, which is I did test positive for COVID-19. I was so tired from Saturday the 14th through Tuesday, March 17th. I kid you not, I could not be out of bed for 5 minutes without needing to go back to bed and lay down.
Search the Woj Pod to listen.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Thursday. We've got the Dow, S&P, NASDAQ, all trading mix. Right now, the Dow is down 62 points. That is a drop of about 0.3%. S&P up 6, now a gain of 0.2. NASDAQ up 92 points for the NASDAQ Composite Index. That is a gain of 1.1%. But stocks are getting whipsawed as concern over the economic impact of the nation's shutdown tempers a rally in technology. In a volatile session, S&P 500 index has been struggling to hold on to its gains. NASDAQ 100 is advancing. Right now, we've got the 10-year up 7/32 with a yield of 0.60%. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo extending the statewide lockdown for 2 more weeks, citing progress made in limiting the spread of the coronavirus. More than 5 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits last week, bringing the total in the month since the outbreak throttled the economy to 22 million. Traders are also assessing a fresh batch of corporate earnings. Morgan Stanley posting a 24% jump in trading revenue while casting doubt on whether those gains can continue. The bank did report record wealth management net revenue of $4 billion, missing analyst estimates of $4.31 billion. Bloomberg Radio and Television spoke this morning with CEO James Gorman, and he told us about the impact that COVID-19 is having on global finance.
You know, what kind of world will we have when we have immunity from it, when we have, the right testing? There are so many unknowns now, whereas back in 2008, it was a fundamental collapse of the whole financial system, and had it not been, the system not been rescued, then who knows what long-term damage, multi-decade, might have been to the economies.
Gorman, by the way, is recovering from the coronavirus. Morgan Stanley shares now lower by 0.6%. Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos says the online retail giant is developing COVID-19 testing capabilities as a first step toward a system of regular checks on its employees globally. And Petco is furloughing a majority of employees, this according to a report from Business Insider. Crude, West Texas Intermediate down 1.2%, recapping S&P up 3. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, let's talk a little Business Week economics now. Kathleen Hayes back with us, Global Economics and Policy Editor for Bloomberg. On the phone from the Poconos, Yelena Shalechevic, senior U.S. economist for Bloomberg Economics, on the phone from Long Island. Yelena, I want to start with you. The jobless claims number, we talked about at the top of the show, still knowing the prediction, knowing the estimates, knowing all of that stuff, it still just sort of knocks you back, right?
Absolutely. And I think it was even the real numbers will continue to rise, and we will continue to see similar readings for the next few weeks, I believe. This last week's reading was probably a little bit lower than it would have been, given that it was a Good Friday holiday and some offices were closed. So there's still a lot of backlogs in processing the data, and we hear it from everywhere, anecdotally and from the Department of Labor as well. So the state departments still are not fully capable of processing all claims that are coming in.
So it's not, so get ready for more.
Ain't over yet.
I would say so, and basically that would imply a double-digit unemployment rate in the April payrolls report, as well as like the payrolls decline in millions and millions of people.
Yeah. Kathleen Hayes, come on in, Global Economics and Policy Editor at Bloomberg News. So, we have seen different cycles, and I do know this one is different because we understand clearly why the numbers are so falling off the cliff. And yet, I do get increasingly as each day goes by and each day we are closed and shut down, and I understand why we are, I do worry about our ability to come back from this. Certainly.
I think it's so interesting, too. I think that's why we hear, you guys ask the same kind of question, you get the same kind of answer from investors and strategists, that what do you like? Who do you like? What do you think of the economy? Are you going to go back into stocks, for example? Are you going to follow this bond rally we've got going today with the 30-year bond yields down to 1.206? It's over more than a point and a half higher in price. But what they often say is, show me which country, show me which, industry the money's going to get to quickest. People seem to, economists and certainly investors seem to think if the government in the U.S., the governments around the world can get the money to people fast, so that people survive, so the small and medium businesses survive, so there's something to rekindle when we are at that point, when we've gotten the vaccine or when we've just gotten far enough in knowing how to handle this virus, we can keep it under control as we gradually reopen our economy. That is what is going to be so key. I think Fed officials realize that, too. That's why you have Rob Kaplan, president of Dallas Fed, speaking to Bloomberg TV today and saying, we're open to seeing more emergency aid for the hard-hit areas where maybe it hasn't gotten to yet. We have a bit of a tussle in the House of Representatives in Washington over this next round of stimulus and if it just should go to the pocket, the paycheck project or not, but that's obviously on the table, so that's still a step in the right direction. John Williams, interesting, speaking of Treasury, president of the New York Fed, speaking virtually for the Economic Club of New York, saying he doesn't think necessarily the Treasury rally is over, right? That the surge, he's not worried about another surge in yields at this point, although he's kind of on guard for it. But all these things out there, but if you're looking for what the Fed is doing to deal with it, they are still ready to do more. Whatever they say, it seems like they always are ready to say, whatever we have to do, we will.
Just Kathleen, just to elaborate on what you were saying, John Williams also said today that the economy will need Fed and fiscal support for the next couple of years. So it's coming from the Fed, it's coming from the economists, and it's starting to look a lot like this will be with us for quite a long time, even if we see a restart of economic activity, and we know the president will be talking later on tonight. But think about it in terms of sectors, in terms of economic sectors. Business investment will not restart right away because companies are losing money. Corporate profits are going to plummet, right? So if you look at housing sector, construction, the construction sector is not building houses, so there will be nothing to sell and buy, and so on. So, consumers will get the checks to survive, but they will not have enough savings to start spending at the levels they were before the crisis. So that will lag as well. So I think it will be a prolonged and quite frankly, a very weak recovery.
And so, Kathleen, just to round it out, I mean, what do you look for next, either from the Fed, either rhetorically or in action?
I don't expect the Fed. I don't know, though. I mean, they may see a place, actually. Raphael Bostic, who's speaking virtually to the Georgia Chamber of Commerce right now. I've got my Zoom open. I just got it on mute right now. He was saying earlier today in another talk that he wants to make sure that money gets to the municipalities. We've got the muni support. He wants to make sure that goes in the right place. So I think for now the Fed watches, sees what happens. And I think the Fed still believes, and I think they may be right, that the economy is, as Yelena just gave us, all the things are to be hit so hard, but with the stimulus, with the sense that the economy was doing okay, right, before the crisis started, is it possible that maybe it will pick itself up a little quicker than we think? And if you have someone like John Williams, he's the number 3 guy at the Fed saying we see the need for monetary and fiscal support for the next couple of years, maybe they'll do everything they can.
Hey, Yelena, 30 seconds here. Runaway inflation, though. Do we have to be worried about that because of just quickly?
Don't worry about inflation right now. And that's what John Williams also said. It will come back when activity is strong enough. So that's not on the Fed's radar.
Well, when the Fed fairy godparents say, "Don't worry about it," I'm going to take it for now.
We'll take it. All right, Kathleen Hayes, thanks so much. Global Economics and Policy Editor for Bloomberg. Yelena Shalecheva, Senior U.S. Economist for Bloomberg Economics. We are going to hear some comments, I think, later on this hour, toward the bottom of the hour, from California Governor Gavin Newsom. Always interested to hear what he's going to say. They're talking to the president today, so that's kind of important.
And I feel like what he has to say really helps set kind of the parameters for how we get back to normal. All right, let's get back to world and national news headlines. Back over to Bob Moonrico. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Carol. House Democrats argue it's time to do it right and authorize the money that's needed now to avoid wasting time by having to keep going back to dole out more. This after the Small Business Administration hit the limit on the first round of loan money Congress provided. As Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports, congressional leaders are still at loggerheads about providing more.
House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy.
We all talked about working together. Cannot understand, after watching another 5 million get unemployed, how Speaker Pelosi continues to say no.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi said negotiations are ongoing to add loan money and then some.
That we allocate more resources to state and local government is an important priority for us. Secondly, more resources for the hospitals. And we had asked for a significant increase in the grants to small businesses.
McCarthy conceded that the disaster grant fund is also out of money. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
This may sound like a big national issue, but it's also traumatizing literally one mom and pop business after another, literally. Just one of those many stories across America is being told by Anna Castillo, whose parents saved their entire lives to buy safe cruise parking in Florida.
Me and my parents have put blood, sweat, and tears into not only coming to this country and like building something for themselves, but in general, like Safe Cruise Parking was built from their savings, from every penny they've ever worked for.
In Brooklyn, about 10 Mr. Softy ice cream truck owners are disregarding requests from headquarters and peddling popsicles anyway, even though they've seen a huge drop in sales. Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
When you follow the facts,
Bloomberg's been reporting on this intelligence community report.
When you seek out the experts,
the investment banks that Bloomberg speak to also want some relief.
No matter what else is happening,
it's been pretty hard to read the signals.
At least you know what's real.
The economic fallout from the virus risks becoming entrenched.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, weekdays at 1 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with my shelter pets, Frankie and Chance. Say hi, guys. When I adopted them, I discovered that they both have incredible personalities. Chance's sole purpose in life is to love and to be loved. Frankie is a little bit of a scoundrel and always entertaining. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
Are you interested in a challenge?
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, you must stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Stay home to help protect the NHS and frontline staff working to save lives. coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a podcast on TuneIn. For expert analysis straight from the WWE to Steve Austin's no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen. Get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft with TuneIn.
Do your homework on this year's top prospects, rising stars, and late-round sleepers with football podcasts like Move the Sticks.
Is my pick because I know he is an athletic freak, a guy that is capable of doing it all. He can blitz, he can run, he can cover.
And when the draft gets underway on April 23rd, follow every round and every pick for free.
In the 2018 NFL. It's always football season on TuneIn.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll look at race, politics, and the pandemic.
Social distancing is critical, but you have to have a certain class position, really, to be able to fully engage that practice.
I'll talk with Kianga Yamada-Taylor. Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
The Woj Pod with Adrian Wojnarowski.
Doris, you had reason to believe that you needed to get a test for the coronavirus.
Right. Well, let's just start with the headline, which is I did test positive for COVID-19. I was so tired from Saturday the 14th through Tuesday, March 17th. I kid you not, I could not be out of bed for 5 minutes without needing to go back to bed and lay down.
Search the Woj Pod to listen.
Lines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are trading mixed. The S&P 500 index just turning negative. It's been a volatile session. Let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here is Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. That's right. U.S. stocks trading choppy today with FANG stocks outperforming. Amazon was up as much as 6.6%. Well, the Dow is down 117 points. Like you said, S&P's drop a point. NASDAQ is higher by 64. The U.S. 10-year yield, that's 0.61%. Small caps down 1.7%. Transports dropped 74, and semis are up 1.8%. Leaders to the upside in the Dow, UNH, Walmart, and Intel. Note that Walmart is trading at a record, while Boeing led to the downside. After earnings, Morgan Stanley was little changed. And in other news, Trump says he'll give economic reopening guidelines at 6 p.m. Wrapping things up, Intuitive Surgical reports after the bell. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill Maloney. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg-type Squawk SQ UAWK on your terminal, I'm Charlie Pellet, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, we've been talking a lot about Wall Street over the past couple of days, in part because earnings from the big banks, they set the tone for the earnings season, and also big banks in a different way. And I was really interested to hear Allison Williams talk about this earlier, Carol. Big banks in a different position than they were in the previous crisis, the financial crisis, where really, to be fair, and to be candid, they helped cause it. In this case, they can be part of the solution. And yet we are hearing a lot of pretty dire warnings from leaders of Wall Street. Linan Nguyen joins us on the phone from New York City, finance reporter, of course, for Bloomberg. A great story, one of the most read here on the Bloomberg today. First of all, Linan, we haven't talked to you in a while. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks, Jason. I am still here in Manhattan, hunkered down.
Yeah.
How are you?
We're doing okay. Hunkered down elsewhere. I can't believe we're in week 5 of all of this. This was a big week, as I said, for Wall Street. You've been tracking all the commentary from the big names. As you synthesize it, what are you hearing? What does it portend for the world at large?
Well, Jason, you hit it right on the head there when you said that last time around the banks were, part of the cause, and this time they're trying to be part of the solution. So a lot of the banks this week have made, great pains to really talk about what they're doing for their employees and also what they're doing for the broader economy. But what really struck me after listening to a bunch of these calls and reading the transcripts is that the CEOs and executives said recession, unprecedented, extraordinary. These are really dramatic words they use, and obviously executives know what they're doing when they speak on earnings calls. They don't really use these type of words lightly, which to me made a really strong impression.
All right, so who are they talking to, Linan? I mean, is that at the president and his team to say, okay, here's what we're seeing, here's what's going on? Like, who are they really talking to? Is it investors? Who is it that because they know when they talk, the world listens. Certainly our audience listens, but the world, at large really listens.
Yes, and I think what they're trying to transmit here is a sense that there is great economic pain to come. A lot of the bank CEOs just sort of parroted their company's economic estimates about GDP, about unemployment. The second quarter looks pretty awful. So they did kind of telegraph that to the broader economy, I think, and they also set the tone for other business leaders as they go into the earnings season. On top of that, we know that many of these bank CEOs are also talking to the administration. Many of them were on calls with the president to discuss what's happening in the economy, and many of them recommended that testing was a kind of key step in going forward. In order to reopen the economies, testing really has to be ramped up in order for us to kind of move forward.
Linan, I want to shift gears a little bit because I know you're talking to the banks and you're talking to all your sources on Wall Street, and you know the culture of Wall Street so well. And Carol and I were just spending a few minutes talking about, some of the comments from James Gorman about the footprint, the physical footprint of some of these big banks. Here in the tri-state area especially, people really look to the banks as economic engines in many ways. The culture of Wall Street helps in part to set the culture of New York City and beyond. How will Wall Street change in your estimation in its day-to-day operations, in its culture? I know we don't fully know that, but I wonder if you're getting any early signals here.
Well, I thought it was very insightful that Gorman, who has recovered from the coronavirus himself, made some pretty intense comments on the call today about the changes that he's seeing in the business. The fact that he thought this would never be able to happen, tens of thousands of employees working from home in the space of 5 weeks. So he talked a lot about the changes and the kind of mindset shift that has happened in the last few weeks. So yes, that footprint is really, major. Obviously, Morgan Stanley's in Times Square. A lot of the banks are real anchors in terms of their big office towers and iconic buildings in New York and other financial hubs. So I think this is definitely going to cause some soul searching and cause people to reset and think, do we need all of this office space? Do we need these towers? Do we need open plan offices? Is that a good idea anymore? So there is a lot of thinking about this. And I talked to another CEO in an electronic trading firm who said, for sure, he's looking at his real estate and saying, I don't need to be, as big in Madison Avenue. People are working from all over the place, and they're working even harder than before.
It's so funny. Don't we have like this kind of inside or maybe outside not joke about when companies build like these massive big headquarters, it always spells trouble. But I do, isn't JP Morgan in the midst of doing a big headquarters?
Yeah, 270 Park Avenue. I mean, it's supposed to be like, that was going to be the Jamie Dimon Legacy building, right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. So yeah. Linan, when you talk to everyone, I mean, what you've been reporting on this world for a while now. What's the mood that you're hearing? What are you hearing from individuals?
I'm hearing a sense of trepidation and of concern. I think a lot of employees who are able to work from home right now are dealing with the same sense of all of their worlds are colliding. So people are working from home. They're also dealing with family, either in their homes or outside, and worrying about loved ones. So it's a sense of collapsing all of your worlds together. We're all very much more understanding of kids and dogs and noise in the background. And so there is a general human element of this that's changing, my conversation with my sources. On top of that, they're thinking about where Wall Street goes. Are they going to go back to the office anytime soon? Do they want to do that? Are they capable of doing that? Or are they, feeling that they want to stay home for the protection of themselves and their families? So that's a real tension that we've noticed in the last few weeks, and we've been covering that very closely with my colleagues.
Well, great reporting as always, and you stay safe. Leanne Nguyen, she's finance reporter at Bloomberg News on the phone in New York. We do want to mention a headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal. This shouldn't come as a total surprise. The Brazilian health minister fired after a clash with President Bolsonaro. This was widely expected because the health minister apparently has been pretty critical and publicly challenging the president's approach to the crisis, according to those in the know. So, nonetheless, some changes there in the administration in Brazil. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks remain mixed. Economic worries have the Dow in the red and the S&P near break-even. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 118. The S&P 500 fractionally lower. The Nasdaq Composite is up 65. ConocoPhillips is slashing North American output by a quarter and halting U.S. fracking in the continent's largest pandemic-related oil cutback to date. The outbreak has crushed fuel demand worldwide, leaving the industry reeling. Going out to eat will likely be very different when the lockdowns finally lift. Seating may be more spaced out, there may be more digital ordering and payment, and there are fears that consumers will be slow to return to bars and restaurants. Apple plans to reopen its lone retail store in South Korea next week, the first outside China to reopen since being closed in March. Bloomberg News has reported Apple will start reopening its U.S. stores in early May. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast. How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team? Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Are you interested in a challenge?
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. Get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft with TuneIn.
Do your homework on this year's top prospects, rising stars, and late round sleepers with football podcasts like Move the Sticks.
Is my pick because I know he is an athletic freak, a guy that is capable of doing it all. He can blitz, he can run, he can cover.
And when the draft gets underway on April 23rd, follow every round and every pick for free.
In the 2018 NFL. It's always football season on TuneIn.
Want to know a great way to discover the latest and greatest sports audio on TuneIn? It's easy. Just make sure push notifications are enabled on your phone to receive recommendations of sports talk radio and podcasts, along with important breaking news updates. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
For weeks, we've heard about panicked shoppers causing a run on toilet paper by irrationally hoarding it. But that ignores one key factor.
That the toilet paper you use when you leave the home is not the same toilet paper you use at home.
How incomplete information, whether about supply chains or infection rates, leads to incomplete narratives. Don't miss this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, Dave Wilson's going to be with us with his chart of the day. Later on, we've got some interesting conversations about China, about Tom's. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about restaurants again, too.
Yes.
Because I really, this sector has been just so beaten up. So what it's like on the other side. All right, let's get back, though, to your top business stories, and let's see what's going on the trading day. We've got 29 minutes to go, Charlie.
Indeed, we do, with the S&P 500 index holding on to gains up 9 now, higher by 0.4%. Just 2 minutes ago, we had the Dow on the plus side barely and tentatively, but right now we've got the Dow down 18 points. It's been a volatile day indeed, with the Dow down 0.1% right now. NASDAQ up 100 points. That's an advance right now for NASDAQ of 1.2%. Bottom line here, stocks getting whipsawed as concern over the economic impact of the nation's shutdown tempers a rally in technology shares. S&P 500 index struggling to hold on to its gains. Well, one of the ongoing challenges for first responders and frontline medical professionals has been the availability of personal protective equipment. Dr. Jason Farley is a professor of nursing at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
In my home state of Maryland, the governor has launched a N95 reprocessing center, one of the largest in the country, to facilitate the reuse and cleaning of N95 masks, which is something that's unheard of. We would never typically reuse those types of masks. So we're being very resilient in our efforts to try to make sure we have enough PPE.
And Farley, of course, speaking with our Tom Keene this morning. The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. United Airlines Holdings warning employees of bleak times and potential long-term payroll cuts despite billions of dollars in American taxpayer assistance, saying the outlook for travel demand will remain depressed into next year. UAL shares, they are trading lower now by 11.2%. So far this year, UAL shares down 68%. American Airlines Group down 9.5%. Delta is down 5.8%. Southwest Airlines lower now by 6%. 10-year up 6/30 seconds, yield now 0.61%. Gold lower, little change, down 30 cents the ounce at $17.16. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.2%, $19.64 a barrel. Again, recapping here, the Dow higher by 25, up 0.1%. S&P up 16, up 0.6. NASDAQ up 117, up 1.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg. Yeah, this is contemporary, I think, Dave Wilson.
Sometimes I just put a song title into Google and see what pops up. And I did that with Go Big and Go Home, and I found this song. It's by a band called American Authors. It's actually been around since 2006. Who knew? Okay. It got my attention for a couple of reasons. Banjo. How often do you hear a rock band play banjo?
No, almost never. The only banjo that I'm used to hearing, I bet this is a band that's on your radar screen, Dave Wilson, is Avett Brothers. You know the Avett Brothers? I'm
familiar with them, absolutely. But I'll tell you, I'm especially sensitive to banjo playing.
Yes.
Now that I'm spending a lot of time at home, finally catching up to seeing the country music series that Ken Burns put together for public television. 16 hours worth over 8 episodes. So I've been hearing a lot of banjo lately.
Can I just say, I was so hopeful that when you started to go in this direction about spending time at home and banjos, that you actually play the banjo.
No,
and you were spending time perfecting your performance.
I just buy that kind of music, that's all. And
I was afraid you were going to say you were spending time at home watching Deliverance, and that was going to be a whole different thing.
No.
God,
no, absolutely
that's a creepy
not.
movie, man.
Why go big or go home? Because that's sort of been the story of the stock market, not just in the current bear market, but also in the preceding bull market. And it's something I was reminded about after seeing this chart the other day on Twitter by Willie Delwich, who's a strategist over at Robert W. Baird. And what he did is he compared the performance of 4 of S&P's benchmark indexes. You've got the S&P 100, which is pretty much the biggest U.S. companies, then the S&P 500, the mid-cap 400, and the small-cap 600. So you're looking at different levels of market value. And when you run the numbers, you see that, for the past 12 months, the S&P 100 has been the top performer, followed by the 400, the mid-cap index, the 500, the mid-cap index, and the small-cap index. And it's something that was happening as the most recent bull market was ending. You saw bigger gains in the larger companies. And now that we've moved into a bear market, you're seeing smaller declines in the bigger companies. So, coming or going so far, if you've gone big, you've made out okay, at least in relative terms. Heck, the S&P 100 is basically little change for the last 12 months, which is saying something considering the kind of upheaval we've seen in stocks lately. And if you went small, it was not beautiful. Let's put it that way. If you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
All right, Dave Wilson, thank you so much. We'll talk to you right after the close of trading here in the U.S. Let's head out west now. Governor Gavin Newsom of California giving his daily update.
This evening at 6 o'clock East Coast time related to guidelines for a phased reopening of the American economy. Without getting into any details, the booklet is being sent out in real time to states large and small across this country. We haven't had time to review the booklet and the guidelines in detail, but I do want to extend, just in broad strokes, appreciation for what I heard from the president as it relates to recognizing the differentiation that exists and persists in terms of conditions in counties, not just in states across this nation, and a willingness to recognize and extend that very directly to governors of the need for a phased approach, a thoughtful and judicious approach based upon conditions and based upon the need to act with the kind of specificity at a state-by-state level that is required. So, in broad strokes, I just want to acknowledge the words, the president and the vice president, and their presentation. It's ongoing. Forgive me for having to step away, but I do want to provide our own announcements today, and we have a few people on the phone and didn't want to delay them away from their business any longer as well. Yesterday, we announced specific strategies to address the needs for unemployed Californians and to do more and do better to quickly turn around unemployment insurance checks, to set up a new PUA program, pandemic uninsured, a new system in this state for individual contractors and small individual owners of businesses. We also laid out strategies to help those that otherwise fell through the cracks in terms of the federal stimulus programs. Today, I want to talk about those essential workers that are not unemployed, that are every single day waking up and putting on their uniforms of sorts to take care of you and me. And that's the folks on the front lines of our food delivery system. I want to talk about work we're doing to support that sector and to support specifically the food chain in the state of California. When I speak of the food sector, when I think in terms of the food chain, I think about the people that grow our food, the people that pick our food, the people that pack our food, deliver our food, cook, serve, and sell our food. That's the food chain in the state of California, broadly defined. And that sector, by definition, is essential to our livelihoods and our capacity to meet just basic needs through this pandemic. And that sector in particular has been hard hit by strife, by challenges in terms of health and safety, by concerns around what is happening within food processing plants, meat packing plants, not just, by the way, in the state of California, but you've seen headlines all across America, particularly in South Dakota, related to the same. This is a serious issue, and it requires a serious response and a much more comprehensive response than we have currently offered. And so today, just an hour or so ago, I signed a statewide executive order impacting the entire food chain and entire sector that will allow for 2 weeks of supplemental paid sick leave for workers that have been contracted COVID-19, been exposed to it, or have been exposed to isolation or quarantine orders by local health officials, federal and or state health officials. I hope this will significantly address some of the anxiety our farm workers have, anxiety our fast food workers have, anxiety around the delivery of our food and those workers have about their own health. We don't want you going to work if you're sick. And we want to make sure that you know that if you're sick, it's okay to acknowledge it, and it's okay to let your employer know and still know that you're going to get a supplemental paycheck for a minimum of 2 weeks. And so I want to just thank the grocer industry broadly. I want to thank UFCW, unions large and small, all across the state of California for working with us, and many leaders across the spectrum, including a wonderful conversation I had yesterday with the Latino caucus that really brought up the importance of focusing on those that pick and pack our food as essential workers, and the dignity of that work and the importance of protecting them at this time of crisis and need. But there are two people in particular I want to thank individually, representing the California Grocers Association and representing UFCW, and that is Ron Fong and John Grant. They're both on the phone, and they have done something very important, and that is they've worked across differences. They've worked together in a collaborative spirit to address some of the largest the needs of some of the largest grocery store chains in America that happen to be here in the state of California, and one of the largest grocer unions, commercial and food workers unions in America as well. And they really started to focus on the needs for sanitation, for hand washing, for breaks to do the same, to address the cleanliness of bathrooms for their workforce, and to make sure that you're protected, but those workers are protected. John Grant has been an extraordinary leader of his union, and John reminded me, and I made this point a few weeks back, that the grocery lines are also the front lines in this pandemic. The essential needs that all of us have of going to the grocery store and knowing those stores are stocked and knowing what is essential is made available in real time. When this pandemic began to take shape, all of us were struggling to respond to a little bit of binge buying, particularly toilet paper and certain types of breads and meats. That raised some supply chain concerns, some logistic warehousing concerns, not just concerns from grocery workers themselves. We reached out to the California Grocers Association. We talked about what their needs were. We reached out to the union to talk about what their needs were. And they collectively have worked out a framework to agree to a framework to support supplemental paid sick leave, and also to address these sanitation issues. But no one better to describe what they have advanced and what they have done to help me guiding the larger sector-wide executive order than the two people I'll introduce to you briefly. And I'll start with the head of the California Grocers Association, who's on the phone, and we'll make a comment or two and turn it over to John, representing the unions, and then talk a little bit more specifically about their leadership after they have a chance to talk more about what advances they've made in terms of an accord.
So you've been listening to California Governor Gavin Newsom with an update, again, talking about those people that are on the front lines and really giving them recognition, well-deserved recognition, talking about governors, holding a call with the president and the vice president, Mike Pence, and this is what we know is going on. It's good to hear that conversation going back and forth between the governors and also the government, certainly in terms of reopening and thinking about reopening and how do you do it.
And it's got to be a coordinated effort. We heard that earlier at our Bloomberg Equality event in the conversation with the mayors of Seattle and Chicago, and your conversation with former governor and former Secretary Sebelius. So it's an interesting time we're in, because it's going to take, even across party lines, a huge amount of coordinated effort, and coordinated because it's going to be staged. We know that.
And this is really key, that Governor Newsom saying that the president in that call with governors understood that there's going to be differentiation between the states. And that certainly mirrors, you just sent around a story by our Jennifer Jacobs that President Trump has told the U.S. governors on a conference call today that some states would be able to reopen businesses and schools before May 1st, when federal social distancing guidelines are set to expire. He did, though, say some governors may want to take more time, conceding that some states are in rough shape. This is according to people familiar with that call, but he did say that the governors, or he did tell the governors that the country is heading in the right direction.
All right, let's get a recap of that and much more from Charlie Pellet. He's got the business flash. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there, Jason Kelly. We've got 14 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. Just want to mention, too, the president will have more to say about all of this tonight. He will be announcing federal guidelines for states to lift stay-at-home orders and relax social distancing practices during his daily news conference at 6 o'clock. Yes, you'll be able to hear that live right here on Bloomberg Radio. You can watch it on Bloomberg Television. But we find out tonight, 6 o'clock Wall Street time, what the president wants to say about states possibly reopening before May 1st. Stocks pushing higher with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all in the green right now. Again, 13 minutes to go. S&P up 12. That's a gain of 0.5%. NASDAQ up 114 points, up 1.4%. And we've got the Dow up 18 now, up by 0.1%. Has been a volatile session. Stocks swinging between gains and losses. The 10-year, the yield 0.61%. Gold up 91 cents the ounce right now at $7 $17.17. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1% at $19.68 a barrel. Recapping, stocks higher. S&P up 13, a gain of 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. I want to drive. Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
It is time for the drive to the close. We're just about 12 minutes away from the closing bell. We do have a headline crossing. President Trump mapping out a phased reopening in guidelines for the state. So just building on the conversation we just had, and Charlie, of course, talking about it too, but, starting to work with governors to figure out how do we reopen and how do we do it safely so that we don't get another second wave of the virus. All right, let's bring in our guest.
Yeah, let's do that. And much more to come. As you heard Charlie say, 6 p.m. the president will address the nation or through a press conference. That daily briefing will be largely about this reopening plan. And I have a feeling we are going to continue to get some details and bits and pieces as it comes out, as it has been shared pretty widely among the governors of the states across the United States. Mitch Rubin with us, Chief Investment Officer and Managing Partner at River Park Funds, joining us on the phone from here in lovely Westchester, New York. Mitch, nice to talk to you and hope you're well.
Yeah, great to be here. And yeah, thankfully, me and my family are both doing fine.
Good to hear. So the market feels like it's doing a little bit more fine than it was. Your fund has done a pretty incredible job. I was just messaging Carol in our sort of chat that we have, beating basically everyone, 5 years in the 99th percentile, 1 month in the 90, you're in the 98th, 99th percentile, for your River Park Long Short Opportunity Fund. Talk to me about what you're seeing out there right now in terms of opportunities, because a fair amount of tech, it looks like, in your portfolio.
Yeah, well, the fund is essentially a hedge fund, a long-short equity hedge fund that's in a mutual fund structure. So we think of it as kind of the best of all worlds and offering that ability to have a fund that has a dual mandate that can both compound our investors' money at equity-like rates, but also protect capital in markets that are disrupted, such as this one. And yet we offer it as a mutual fund, so low minimums, daily liquidity. We don't charge a promote or none of the sort of downsides of being in a hedge fund. And I think hedged vehicles have not, been in favor in straight up markets. But I think when you look at the kind of disruption and dispersion that comes from either market altering events or that just come over time from the creative destruction of businesses succeeding and businesses failing, a fund that has a lot broader tool set and has the ability to profit no matter what's going on in the market, and yet, in a straight up market might perform a little bit worse than the average index, but has the ability to make money or protect capital in a down market. So, that's the structure of the fund, and we're certainly excited about the performance we've had, but we believe it's still the right fund for a lot of people to be in for what the future holds.
And it's active, correct?
It's active, yeah, and so we're very much active. We're old school stock pickers, so bottoms up research, individual stocks. We don't use ETFs or indexes, or we do use derivatives from time to time. But we absolutely believe over time that long-term research into individual companies and selecting the winners and losers based upon earnings growth and valuation is still the key to long-term investing. And while, people have gravitated towards passive over time, we think active stock picking really is critical, especially during periods of time where there's a disruption that causes certain businesses to thrive and others to fail.
Well, it's interesting I bring it up because there was a story in reading in this morning. I think it was the Norway Sovereign Wealth Fund, huge fund, and they were finding that those active fund managers were actually outperforming some of the passive strategies. And so I just find it interesting, right? When we're coming off a world where so much has been passive, that when you have a time of volatility, sometimes it helps to be active, right? And really watch what's going on.
Yeah, I think what happens in an index is you don't realize that the index generally is biased towards what has worked lately, but not necessarily either quality of business, quality of balance sheet, valuation. It's really just based on a different set of rules. And then everybody tends to pile in, in a time where passive has taken share, people tend to bid up the index, and not every company in the index is deserving of that. And so when you have events, have oil prices collapse or interest rates collapse or something like this where certain businesses have gone dark and others are still operating, the index hasn't necessarily been structured in that way. And also, I think investors tend to do the exact opposite of what they should do. So you tend to get people sell when markets are down and buy when markets are up, and that accentuates your offense or defense if you're in an index. And so if you're actively managed, you have the ability, to pick and choose where your exposure is. And I think those benefits are highlighted when the market's disrupted, not when it's gone straight up.
So talk to us about some names. As I mentioned at the top, you've got some big tech in there, Microsoft, Amazon. You also have, I really want to talk about this one, given some of my journalistic interests, Blackstone, BX, pretty big holding. Tell us about that one.
Okay, so, we are absolutely bottoms-up driven growth investors on the long side. And then on the short side, we're looking for businesses that are being disrupted by innovation or creative destruction. Blackstone, so in a normal growth fund, yes, we have a lot of tech. There's a lot of disruption going on in tech and innovation, although I think the word tech is too broad.
Sure.
There's a lot of businesses.
Agreed.
But for Blackstone, so this is an asset manager. You don't necessarily think of asset management as a growth business, but they are a alternative asset manager. They started as just a private equity fund, and they've diversified into a multi-strat manager. They've had extraordinarily good performance, but they're also structured in a way that matches up to a lot of giant asset investors in that they're not daily mark-to-market funds. Right. They're meant to be invested for 7 to 10-year time frames. That means you can use long-term debt. That means you can actually buy the business outright and manage it. It also means that you tend to have capital available to buy when the markets are down, and then you're incentivized to sell when they're up. They make money by taking things public or selling them to other people, and they only get paid when they profit. And they also, I think, they have a dual earning stream. So they make fees. They have a fee-based business that's better than any mutual. They have a much better business than I do. They collect fees whether they're up and down any quarter because they're based on closed funds, so the investors don't take money out. And then they profit if they're right at any point over time because they choose when to exit. And then they're also, unlike my business, they have massive fees that have not been under pressure. And so while, I run a fund that doesn't charge a promote, all of their funds both make fees and profits, and that's, much better for them.
They've got a big-time promote. That's to be sure. We're going to need to continue this conversation at some point down the line because I could go another 35 minutes with you just on Blackstone, and we want to talk about much more. Thank you so much, Mitch Rubin. Great to spend some time with you, Chief Investment Officer, Managing Partner at River Park Funds, on the phone in Westchester. Carol?
Yeah, great conversation. He also likes Microsoft and Amazon, so next time around, we'll get into that with him. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. We're just about 3.5 minutes away from the closing bell. Stick around. We'll have those closing numbers in just a moment right here on Bloomberg.
Let's tune in sports on this day. On this day in 1987, Michael Jordan becomes the second NBA player in history to score 3,000 points in a season.
Dances left of the dribble, gives to Jordan. Michael across lane, got it knocked away, got it back, fakes, lays it in. He's over 3,000 for the year now. 23 straight points for Jordan. A standing O in Chicago. To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier. That also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went to high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. There you have it, sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange as we wrap up trading on this Thursday. That's Eric Millian, Supervisor of Facilities, all alone ringing the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange. And this update brought to you by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Learn why the world's most sophisticated advisory firms and broker-dealers rely on Pershing to help them improve profitability, create efficiency, attract talent, and manage risk at Pershing.com. An up day across the board here. What a session. Stocks moving between gains and losses. At the end of the day, though, the S&P picked up 16, a gain of 0.6%. Dow Industrials up 29. That was a gain of just about 0.1%. NASDAQ surging 139 points for NASDAQ. That was a gain there of just about 1.7%. As for the 10-year, the yield there, 0.61%, up 6/30 seconds. Gold advancing today by $2 the ounce, up 0.1%, $17.19 the ounce. So the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing today. Kristen Bitterly is head of capital markets at Citigroup Global Markets.
Going into earnings season and the decline in earnings that we're expecting not only in Q1, but also in Q2, it seems really odd to have the S&P 500 at a 2,800 level right now. So our advice is to actually stay slow and steady and not chase this rally.
And this headline from the Bloomberg Professional Service. The Congressional Budget Office says the CARES Act will increase the budget gap by at least $1.6 trillion this fiscal year. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all higher, as I mentioned. Crude oil, West Texas Intermediate, dropping today by just about 1.1%. Some of the other stories we're following. Morgan Stanley out with earnings this morning. Shares lower today. Morgan Stanley after earnings dropping by just about 0.1%. Recapping an up day, S&P up 0.6. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Your next move will be your last.
Nobody move a muscle.
Damn, Mississippi. You got to move.
And I'm moving on from town to town.
Time is money. Let's go. Come on, move it.
Shake it up. Shake it up.
Bloomberg Business Week, Movers and Shakers with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, monitoring the various press conferences from the governors and around the country, so we'll bring you any news as they are known, and we'll take you there as well. Let's take a little bit more of a deep dive into the trading day. S&P 500, kind of a mixed bag, kind of an even split, 237 names in the S&P 500, ending up the day with gains, 268 lower. And Jason, that really reflects what we saw in the trade, because we did bounce around a little bit, albeit in a pretty tight range compared to yesterday's close, and we finished pretty much near our highs of the session. So considering the rough economic news, the news that we heard from JP Morgan, not JP Morgan, excuse me, Morgan Stanley,
other
in terms
Morgan.
of the other Morgan, in terms of the outlook. So, that's some resiliency, I would say, in terms of the market environment.
Well, especially interesting because we did see the market take a leg down when New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. I keep pausing because
I know we keep saying Mario.
I keep saying Mario, and at some point during this crisis, I'm going to call him by his real name.
Or he's going to call you and say,
or he's going to call me Justin, or Dennis, I guess he would call me Dennis. But in any case, when Governor Andrew Cuomo talked about extending the sort of pause, quote unquote, for New York to May 15th, you did see stocks take a leg down, in part because we are all sort of parochial animals, and knowing the engine that is New York, and knowing that New York is a little bit of a harbinger at this point for other states out there. And we heard that from the mayor of Chicago in our conversation earlier, that they feel like they're about 2 weeks behind where we are now out in Chicago. But as you say, some resilience here, and you do wonder where that's coming from, in part because the gains were driven on the, sort of biggest mover side by a lot of healthcare names. Anthem, Humana, Cigna, I believe at least toward the end there were your three biggest gainers in the S&P. Yeah, no, it's interesting to see that, right? And healthcare, in fact, overall, Jason, was your best performing major industry group in the S&P 500, up 2.2% overall. Right below that, consumer discretionary up almost 2%. Information technology was up about 1.25%. Consumer staples were up just shy of 1%. Bottom of the pack, these were the groups that actually lost some ground. Materials, real estate, industrials, financials, that makes sense, and the energy names continue really to get beat up. They're down about 4% today as a group. Well, when you have the Morgan Stanley CEO coming out and saying we're not going to need as much real estate, that's kind of a big deal. Wild. And we should point out your worst performer in the S&P, Simon Property Group, which is retail and real estate at the end of the day. And if you essentially have fewer people shopping, fewer stores open, malls aren't going to do great. I mean, David Simon has been a guest on this program. We have talked to him on stage at a Bloomberg Live event 150 years ago or last November, depending on how you're counting. I think about what one of the mayors said on your Bloomberg Live event, that every day is like a dog year. A dog year. And that's truly how it feels in terms of the amount of information we're dealing with, the changes in our world, just the stuff kind of coming at us. That's how it really feels. So it's Thursday Lemon. It's Thursday Lemon. Walmart, that stock was up 3.6%. And we know, this is a retailer that's doing pretty well amid all this. They seem to have figured out people relying pretty heavily. No supply chain issues, I think, is one of the good things that's working for Walmart. Closed at a record. And remember the story in the magazine that they really are tapping into the healthcare community as well. So I'm sure some of that in terms of the virus. Good point. Good point. That they were able to kind of help consumers along those lines as well. All right, volatility. The VIX. The VIX down about 2% today, closing at 40.05. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up. Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for the price on Wilson. Open up the door, it's Dave. Who? Dave.
Hey, Mr. Wilson. Bloomberg stocks editor Dave Wilson is back with his stock of the day. Dave, what do you got for us?
I've got Jack in the Box, Carol. It's a company that says in press releases that, quote, they pride themselves on being the curly fry in a world of regular fries. The restaurant chain has more than 2,250 company-owned and franchise locations in 21 U.S. states, mostly in the South and West. Jack in the Box was founded in 1951 and went public in 1992. The ticker, as you might expect, is Jack. Jack in the Box shares set a record in December 2016. This year, they took a tumble as the coronavirus took hold. Their year-to-date loss reached 78% in mid-March. Now, since then, Jack in the Box has rebounded. The rally accelerated after the release late yesterday of sales figures for the fiscal second quarter, which ended this past Sunday. Sales at Jack in the Box restaurants open more than a year fell 4.2%. Analysts expected far worse. The average estimate in a consensus metric survey called for a drop of 9.1%. And on top of that, Jack in the Box estimated that it ended the quarter with about $165 million in cash. Put that all together, and you saw the company's shares rise to their highest price in 5 weeks. They climbed more than 21.5%.
That's a big bounce.
It is.
But it's coming from a pretty substantial low.
Absolutely.
It's all overly, relative, right?
You bet.
All right, Dave Wilson, we really appreciate it. Coming up, we do expect that we're going to hear from Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont. A lot of eyes on the governors right now, today, especially because they've been briefed by the president. We know that ultimately, from a little bit of reporting, we'll talk about this in a minute, a lot of this is going to rest on the governors. The president does seem to be conceding that point that ultimately it's going to be up to them what these phases look like.
Very different from what we heard earlier in the week.
Not the total authority.
Quite a 180. So, but I think that's really reassuring because, as we keep saying, that the folks that are seeing this day to day, firsthand, really have an understanding of where we are in the virus and what's going to take to get back.
All right, this portion of Bloomberg Business Week is brought to you by NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, ranked one of the most research-intensive universities in the nation by the Carnegie classification. More at njit.edu/R1. This is Bloomberg. Let's head over to Mark Mills for some world and national headlines. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Jason Carroll, thank you. Federal guidelines the Trump administration issued to states today recommend that they document a downward trajectory in cases of coronavirus and flu-like illnesses before relaxing stay-at-home orders. States could then proceed into a 3-phase reopening process, according to the guidelines, which were obtained by Bloomberg News. The guidelines recommend that employers develop and implement social distancing practices, temperature checks at workplaces, testing for virus, and increased sanitation and use of disinfection. President Trump will speak about those guidelines at 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Join us for live coverage here on Bloomberg Radio. New York extended its lockdown order to May 15th, and New Jersey said it would keep its schools closed at least until the same date. Governors of the two states are part of a coalition trying to coordinate a regional reopening of their economies. New York Governor Cuomo cautioned about the risks of reopening an economy too soon.
Why don't you open tomorrow? Because we're afraid the infection rate will go up. And everything we've been doing is to slow the infection rate.
Airline traffic fell weeks ago to levels that hadn't been seen in the jet era, and it's only getting worse. United Airlines says it will be at about 10% of capacity for the next 2 months. CEO Oscar Munoz said in a letter to employees that the airline expects to fly fewer people during the entire month of May than it did on a single day of May last year. Brian Dennehy has died, the burly actor who won 2 Tony Awards for his stage work in plays by William Shakespeare, Eugene O'Neill, and Arthur Miller. Dennehy died of natural causes at the age of 81. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Mark Mills.
The markets. No, you can't just run screaming from the room.
A lot of economists are just throwing up their hands and saying, we don't know.
But you don't have to manage this alone.
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
What is your early read as to the scope and scale of this plan?
Bloomberg Markets. Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert, filling in for Smokey, because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Are you in?
Get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft with TuneIn.
Do your homework on this year's top prospects, rising stars, and late-round sleepers with football podcasts like Move the Sticks.
Is my pick because I know he is an athletic freak, a guy that is capable of doing it all. He can blitz, he can run, he can cover.
And when the draft gets underway on April 23rd, follow every round and every pick for free.
In the 2018 NFL. It's always football season on TuneIn.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 4, relax. Don't feel like you have to be productive during these stressful days? This is the perfect time to focus on yourself. Whether that means meditating, taking a bath, sleeping in, or doing nothing at all, take a deep breath and treat yourself. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
Want to know a great way to discover the latest and greatest sports audio on TuneIn? It's easy. Just make sure push notifications are enabled on your phone to receive recommendations of sports talk radio and podcasts, along with important breaking news updates. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll look at race, politics, and the pandemic.
Social distancing is critical, but you have to have a certain class position, really, to be able to fully engage that practice.
I'll talk with Kianga Yamada-Taylor. Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
The Mina Kimes Show podcast.
Kevin Clark.
If Josh Allen became the 10th best quarterback in football this year, they'd probably win 14 games. Am I wrong about that?
No. If you as a quarterback can't win in the Bills' situation right now, they should not extend you. So many teams, Jets, do not have the information they need to evaluate their quarterbacks based on the teams they've built around. The Bills do.
Listen and subscribe to the Mina Kimes Show podcast.
Search the Mina Kimes Show to listen.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Turned out to be an up Thursday with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. Stocks climbed as President Trump mapped out a phased country reopening amid dismal economic numbers. In a volatile session, S&P 500 index advanced 16 points, up 0.6%. NASDAQ 100 wiping out its losses for 2020. Traders also assessing a fresh batch of corporate earnings, with Morgan Stanley posting a 24% jump in trading revenue while casting doubt on whether those gains can continue. Morgan Stanley shares down today by 0.1%, little changed. Again, the S&P up 0.6%, NASDAQ up 139 points, up 1.7%. The Dow up 0.1% higher by 33 points. The 10-year up 6/32, the yield 0.61%. Gold higher now by 30 cents the ounce, little changed at $17.17. Crude back below $20 a barrel, down 1.5% now at $19.58. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. A busy Thursday here, and trying to keep an eye on what's going on in the markets, trying to discern what the markets are saying, what the public officials are saying, what companies are saying. To help us break all of that down, we turn to Kirk Hartman. He is the Global Chief Investment Officer at Wells Fargo Asset Management. He's got some thoughts on what the Fed's role has been in all of this. Kirk, great to have you with us. First of all, trust all is well and healthy with you.
Yes, thank you for asking.
So what do you make of the moves that have been made so far? We've been talking a lot about sort of monetary versus fiscal and, who's done the right things and what the implications are. It feels like we are in a mode or have been in a mode, and Mike McKee, our economics correspondent, was talking about this earlier on this program, that, it's just like get it done, rescue, shore it up. But there are implications to that, right? What do you make of it?
Well, no question. I mean, the Fed put is alive and well, and the Federal Reserve, in my mind, took unprecedented action last Thursday when it put in place its expanded purchasing programs. The Fed, as you know, had been buying AAA-rated mortgage-backed securities, AAA-rated CLOs, high-grade munis, up to 2 to 3 years, and a variety of all the commercial paper programs to support the market. But the Fed went even further and put in place programs now to buy BBB-rated bonds that have fallen to BB, and also to support and buy high-yield ETFs. So in my mind, the Fed has put a clear line in the sand that it wants to keep volatility for high-quality credits low. It wants a lot of liquidity in the market. And I think the markets are responding, both the fixed and the equity markets are responding very well to that, because there's the feeling the Fed will come to the rescue. The implications of it are a lot more government debt. The Federal Reserve balance sheet is now at $5 trillion, and I've seen estimates of the balance sheet going at the end of the year to as high as $9 trillion, which is 40% of GDP.
It's massive.
So,
yeah,
it's massive.
Well, Kirk, that's it. Like, we've had some interesting reporting too, and opinion pieces about, is money becoming worthless the way the Fed is doing what it needs to do? And I don't take anything away from them, because they have been crucial in keeping our financial markets going and keeping it liquid. And just like even the stimulus programs, like these are things that we need to do. But I do wonder what kind of dislocations we are creating in the markets. How do you see it? You understand all these different asset classes. What are potentially some of the problems that we might be creating here?
Well, you do worry about price transparency and whether information is being properly conveyed. So to your point, I love the Churchill expression after World War II with all the debt, when he made the comment, "We're all socialists now." And in my mind, we are all socialists now, and a lot of these programs were needed. But also, the government is very much, in my mind, controlling and limiting the volatility of prices in the market for certain high-quality credits and commercial paper. So the worry is the lack of price transparency. The other thing that's very interesting about this is there may be a silver lining in that I think this is going to keep rates above zero, and I think that's important because I don't want to see us fall into the trap of Europe because there's so much supply. Last week there was 320 billion of T-bills floated in the market,
right?
And I think that's going to keep rates above zero, which is a good thing.
That's crucial. I know, we're not a heck of a lot above it, but we are above it. And I do think that's interesting, especially when I think about all the stories and interviews we've done about, does the United States maybe become Japan? This is an important metric to stay above zero.
No, very much so. And I think what's interesting is a lot of the conversations I've been having with institutional clients and retail clients. Institutional clients are very interested in investment-grade corporates, short-dating investment-grade corporates. And it's interesting, a lot of questions on the individual side about are we eventually going to get inflation, which I think is the other side of this coin, which is if the government's got to finance $3 trillion, it's going to have to flood the market with paper, and do we eventually get inflation? So to your point, there are a lot of implications and consequences for all these programs.
All right, so before we let you go, Kurt, got to ask you about China because we were in this sort of decoupling process owing to the trade war. This has put a whole new twist on U.S.-China relations, but also really called into question what the superpower balance, if there is one, is going forward, especially between those two countries. What do you make of China here as we go forward in the short, mid, and long term?
Well, I think what's interesting here is China may ironically come out of this in better shape in the sense of obviously a tremendous shock, but China got the message about the trade wars that they have to produce their own technology. Mm-hmm. And China is very much stimulating its own economy and opening up its economy. So I think China and all of Asia will become more Asia-centric, and I think that will spawn a lot of technology and industries in China and in places like Korea and Taiwan. So I think in some ways China will, in a way, benefit from a lot of the economic turmoil.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Kirk Hartman, President and Global Chief Investment Officer for Wells Fargo Asset Management, looking after about $518 billion. Wells Fargo Asset Management is. He joined us on the phone from Los Angeles. Carol?
I do wonder about the dislocation, what this creates, right? All this money floating around, and I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell on this.
Yeah, dislocation in markets, dislocation in economies, dislocations in trade, all of it. I mean, we know it in our daily lives, but what are the macro effects on that? It's a big question. Show.
Coming up, we're going to get a DC check with our own Kevin Cirilli.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Technology led the way as stocks finished narrowly higher. The market overcame more dismal economic data, including more than 5 million new jobless claims last week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 33, the S&P 500 gained 16, the Nasdaq Composite climbed 139. In another report, the government said home construction fell in March by the most since 1984 as the pandemic began taking its toll. Housing starts fell more than 22%. Small businesses have seen their fears come true as the government's small business relief program ran out of funds. Without more money for the program, many firms that have flooded banks with loan applications won't get help. Oil closed under $20 a barrel for a second day, with an agreement by producers to cut output not enough to keep pace with falling demand. OPEC says it expects demand for its crude to fall to the lowest level in 3 decades. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
The market's in focus every business day. The P&L Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
What's behind this engine of gains?
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
The U.S. market looks relatively safe.
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
Ward McCarthy joins us right now.
P&L with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Are you
Get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft with TuneIn.
Do your homework on this year's top prospects, rising stars, and late round sleepers with football podcasts like Move the Sticks.
Is my pick because I know he is an athletic freak, a guy that is capable of doing it all. He can blitz, he can run, he can cover.
And when the draft gets underway on April 23rd, follow every round and every pick for free.
In the 2018 NFL.
It's always football season on TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went up high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. TuneIn makes it easy to be a part of the conversation. Just make sure push notifications are enabled to hear about breaking news and trending topics from around the sports world. You'll also get custom recommendations of podcasts and radio stations covering the sports and teams you care about. The sports world is full of inspirational stories of heroic figures. It also has its fair share of shady characters. For detailed retellings of the darkest sagas in sports, explore TuneIn's documentary podcasts, like 30 for 30's The Sterling Affairs, about the scandalous life and times of the former Clippers owner, Donald Sterling, and Gladiator, which follows Aaron Hernandez's transformation from Super Bowl star to convicted murderer. For these and more, search sports documentaries on the TuneIn app.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier. That also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is,
or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Well, coming up, we're going to get an update on what is going on in Washington. It's a big day. The president speaking with U.S. governors. We're going to get a preview of what he's likely to say, the president, that is at 6 p.m. with our own Kevin Cirilli.
All right, looking forward to heading to the nation's capital in just a moment. Let's get back, though, to the news desk and a check on your top stories and those closing numbers. Hey, Charlie Pellet.
Well, hello there, and here's what's going on. Volatile session today, this Thursday. The S&P 500 index did advance. NASDAQ 100 wiped out its losses for 2020. Traders also assessing a fresh batch of corporate earnings. Morgan Stanley posting that 24% jump in trading revenue while casting doubt on whether those gains can continue. Today, we saw the S&P 500 index advance 16 points, up 0.6%. NASDAQ up 139, up by 1.7%. And the Dow Jones Industrial Average up 33 points, up by 0.1%. 10-year yield 0.61%. Gold higher, little changed, up $1.34 the ounce. That's a gain of just about 0.1%. 17.18 on spot gold. And West Texas Intermediate crude back below $20. $19.64 for a barrel of WTI. A drop today of just about 1.2%. America's labor market continues to reel. Another 5 million workers filed jobless claims as the coronavirus sweeps the nation. Michael Purvis is the CEO of Talbot and Capital, and he told Bloomberg Television today the COVID pandemic has caused disruption through multiple levels of the economy, and it could take a while for those jobs to come back.
COVID drove an oil demand shock that drove a price war between Saudi and Russia, which in turn, could mean the end of several million barrels a day of oil production in the U.S., which could mean permanent job disruption from high-paid oil workers, which have been a key part of the economic expansion over the last several years.
Facebook says it added warnings to 40 million pieces of misinformation about the coronavirus on its main social network in March, part of an effort to stem the spread of bad advice and misleading articles. Facebook shares down today by 0.4%. And Starbucks says it's planning to gradually expand operations at some stores in the United States, citing progress in the fight to contain the coronavirus. Starbucks shares did advance today, up by 1.3%. And again, 6 o'clock Wall Street time, President Trump will have more to say on the gradual reopening of the U.S. economy. Recapping, equities higher today with the S&P up 16, up 0.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. We are awaiting some comments from Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont. And as we said, governors, they have been front and center more than ever today, as they were briefed by the president, who will take questions and make his presentation in just about an hour and a half.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting, too, is you've got now a group of governors on the West Coast, a group of governors on the East Coast, and then I saw something come across, too, about governors out in the Midwest. So they are, collaborating, which makes sense, right? Because we constantly talk about, this virus doesn't understand a state border.
Right.
It's not going to stop. So you do have to have coordination so that we do not have a second wave of this virus. This is going to be crucial. And if anything we've learned from in terms of maybe how China has handled it, the lockdown and then how you reopen, this is really important. All right, let's take you to Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont.
About the future here in the state of Connecticut. And it's time to think about it. If you look at these numbers, I think obviously the death rate is continuing and it's so disheartening, but it's a lagging indicator. And the hospitalization, you see the plus 18 is the lowest number we've had in weeks now. Yesterday was up, though, a little bit, but it does give you an idea that there's a trend that's positive for us. The next slide, I think, is indicative. If you could do the next slide, thank you. You'll see that Fairfield County is flattening out a little bit. In fact, their new admissions are down 10%, and that's despite a bit of a spike in Bridgeport. Gives you an idea of the trends there. New Haven is the next line. That as well is flattening out, and their new admissions are down about 35%. Again, a positive trend that we have capacity in our hospitals, and the new admissions, which is an indicator of growth, is slowing. Unfortunately, Hartford, the rate of their hospitalizations were up 30%. And that just reminds you that this is a pandemic that's going to be with us for a while, even though we got to think about what happens next. The last month or two, we've been in the airplane and building it at the same time. And as we've been learning as we go with this fast-changing pandemic, today, as things begin to change, we got to figure out what is a soft landing for that airplane and make sure we do it in a way that we don't bounce back up again, that we get everybody home safely. I just came from a teleconference with the president and vice president, and they'll be announcing very soon their plan. They call it Opening Up America. And it's interesting, there they give guidance. They leave it up to local governors. They leave it up to the regions. One thing I thought was interesting in terms of the metrics that determine how fast you can open, they pointed out that flu-like symptoms now are probably COVID, because the flu season, the traditional flu season, is behind us. So they look at those symptoms, they look at hospitalization, and they've come up with 3 phases of slowly being able to thoughtfully open up the economy. But all those 3 phases, even in those states that are the least affected, they still are going to maintain temperature checks, still maintain testing, maintain social distancing for the near term anyway, just to make sure that we don't let this pandemic